All right, welcome into another Mission 1000 podcast. Today we've got a badass guest. Again, I'm going to be introducing him very shortly. He is the master of defense. He's been spotlighted on television shows, news shows like Fox, NBC, ABC, and its affiliates, and also been on the TEDx talk stage. Welcome in Jeff McKissick. How are you, Jeff?
Hello. Good to be here,
Doing
buddy.
great today. We have a beautiful day in Dallas, Texas, which
Gosh.
is where you are located too, right?
Yeah, it was tempting, buddy. I almost called in sick on this one.
It's almost too nice to be working today. I know, right? Even
Yeah.
though this isn't work, right? We're just
Well, considering
kicking
our
it
last
today.
month was like hit and miss with all the ice and weird weather. So just to have it in the mid upper 70s today is awesome.
Yeah, just a week ago it was like 29, so this is pretty cool. But welcome in, man. I appreciate having you on. We've got some good stuff to talk about today.
Mhm.
We're talking about you today and the defense business. And I'm excited to learn more about it because I don't really know much about the defense business and what you do specifically. Although I've done my due diligence and I know a little bit, but we're going to learn some more today. But I want to know more about your background first. And so I know you're in Dallas right now. Is that where you've been most of the time?
Yeah, I've been here over half my life. I grew up in Florida, but I've been in Dallas now well over half my life. So I'm like the bumper sticker. I wasn't born here, but got here as quick as I could.
Yeah, well, Florida's the second best, I'd have to say.
Hmm.
It depends on where you're from, right? Those
Exactly.
Floridians are kind of crazy, but they do have nicer beaches than we do. So,
Yeah.
there's pros and there's cons to it.
Yeah.
So, well, tell us where you got started in the defense business.
Well, interestingly enough, right out of college back in 1987, I had come to my parents' home in Fort Worth, like many college graduates. It's like, okay, what am I going to do now with a degree? And I was sitting at their place, and a gentleman came on that evening on television. He was an investigative reporter for 2020, 60 Minutes, and NBC News. This
Okay.
is a man that interviewed Ted Bundy, Henry Lee Lucas, John Wayne Gacy, many of the names we know in crime history, over 1,000 of them. And over a 10-year period, as he did so, and he had a chance to sit across the table from these, I'm not going to use the word gentlemen, they were anything but these individuals, he asked them a question no one else had really asked them. Everyone else was trying to get inside their head, psychoanalyze them. Why did you do what you did?
Oh
Ken,
yeah, we've all seen the different serial killer crime documentaries.
yeah.
My wife watches those on the daily, by the way. She's
Oh, yeah. Oh,
obsessed.
listen, I run into people constantly, male and female alike, that love those shows. And I think they're actually serving a good purpose by putting
Sure.
information out there. But Ken Wooden asked him a question no one else had bothered to ask. He said, I really don't care why you did it. I want to know how you did it. How did you convince people to trust you? How did you lure people? How did you build that rapport? You didn't use a gun or knife, you just used a good story. How did that work? And after over 1,000 of these interviews, he found that the lures they use fell into 13 basic categories. And from that, he developed a program called the Child Lures Crime Prevention Program. It was featured on numerous shows. Today Show, Good Morning America, it's still one of the top 10 episodes ever on Oprah Winfrey, all these different shows. And one of the things we did in the late 80s to promote this, well, let me back up. So I see him on TV, and I'm thinking at 22, when you have no fear, and this is pre internet, I hand wrote a letter and put my phone number at the bottom and say, hey, I caught you on TV. I think what you're doing is incredible. Is there a chance that maybe I could work with you? And I thought, yeah, that'll never happen. But hey, 22 and you have no fear, why not roll the
What's the
dice?
worst that could happen?
He could say, no, we're not respond at all. Big deal. But 2 weeks later, he did respond. He called that phone number, and I was at my parents' home, and he said, hey, I'd like to meet you. Can you come up to Vermont? So my dad put me on a plane. He successfully lured me up to Vermont. We hit it off. In the next 6 to 8 years, I worked as his apprentice, helping to put stories together for the national media, as well as teaching his program, Child Lures, to 250,000 K through 12 students, another 40, 50,000 adult professionals, and teacher in service, hospital in service, parent programs. So by the time I was 25, I'd already been in front of 300,000 people live. Talking about baptism by fire as far as public speaking, that was
Yeah,
it.
and to this point, you're saying that most of these are in school settings, and these are children.
At that time, yes.
Okay.
Although, again, we did do some interesting community programs. We were at several hospitals doing CME and CNE seminars for doctors and nurses. There were other groups that we did work with, but it was primarily focused on that educational market. Well, one of the things that we did in the late 80s that caught a lot of attention was, and it was for a lot of these national shows, we would go out to shopping malls and on college campuses on hidden camera lure over 200 men and women into cars and vans using these lures to show if we can lure you as an adult, of course, we could lure your child or grandchild. That was to promote child lures. So it was very effective. It did exactly what we expected it would do, and it got that program in a lot of school systems across the country.
So how does someone like you or someone like that lure an adult that easily?
Oh, well, we'll get to that in a second. Let me finish up this thought
Yes.
because
Okay.
what happened was when that took place, yes, we were doing this to promote the child lures program. But the thing that kept haunting me after these exercises was okay, if we're teaching the kids, yes, who's teaching these adults who are also getting into the cars? And so I saw that there was an opportunity to teach adults. And so after a number of years working Ken with his blessing, and I will still forever and a day promote his program because I do believe it is the best program for teaching kids out there. Yes, my opinion is biased, but I have 250,000 kids I taught with it to say that and have that bias. But to your point, how did we do it? There were a number of different lures. We pretended to be police officers undercover. We pretended to be modeling agents. We pretend to need help, whether on crutches or in a sling, arm in a sling, all these different things that the actual criminals used as
Yeah.
ruses when they were luring people.
Yeah. Well, not too long ago, I had someone that was broken down on the side of the road and asking for help, right? And when I got out and I pulled over, and this was on one of those ramps where you're about to get on the highway, but you're doing one of those loops before you get onto the highway, somewhere in Dallas. I pull over. I've got my whole family in the truck, and as soon as I get out of the car, there's the one dude that waved me down. I get out of my truck to go walk to their car to see what kind of help the guy needed, and
Mhm.
two other they're all wearing gold chains and real suspicious looking dudes got out of their car as soon as I got out, and they all started approaching me, and I was like, I'm getting back in the truck and I'm gonna head out. Is that probably a good idea?
That was probably a good idea. In
Yeah.
fact, probably 10, 12 years ago, or maybe even as long as 15, I was doing a seminar at a community center once, and this gentleman comes up afterwards and he said, let me show you what happens when someone doesn't listen to what you say. And he pulls up his shirt and there's a gash in his abdomen. So what happened? He said, Jeff, I grew up in Alabama and I was on my way home and I was on the freeway or interstate going there. And at one point, it's a long stretch, just nothing but me. And I see this pretty young girl on the side of the road with the hood up. To your point, I thought, okay, just in case, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to look at the tree line, make sure that, concentrate. He said, I didn't even pull up behind her. I went around the front of the car. So I had a good view of what was going on. I get up there, I pull in front. I don't see anybody. I looked in the car as I drove by, didn't see anybody in there. I parked the car. I get out of the car. As soon as I get near her, three guys in the tree line that were laying flat popped up, stabbed me like a pig, left me on the side of the road, and took my car. He said, fortunately, Good Samaritan came along, obviously saw I did need help, and got me to the nearest hospital. But yeah, that happened to me.
Wow.
So it's one of those things where, and this was interesting too. When we were luring people, every single person to a T, when it was all said and done, and reporters came out and said, why did you do it? Why did you fall for this? To a person, every one of them basically said the same thing. I knew I shouldn't have done this. I knew you guys were, something told me this wasn't right,
That
which
gut
told us
feeling.
that their instincts were working. They
Mm,
didn't listen, plain and simple. So to your point, what you did was exactly right. It didn't matter.
right.
It did not matter what the actual outcome of that situation you were in had been. You did the right thing because your instincts told you, get out of here. That's all you need to know. And I constantly have to remind people, which has been around longer to keep us vertical on the planet, our survival instincts or our developed brain?
That's right.
So which one should you actually listen to in those moments? The one that says, get out of here or get in your truck, or the one that says, well, let me think about my options here.
Why do we question our personal instincts
Buddy.
so often? Because it's not just personal, it's not just defense or safety, that it's making daily decisions like, hey, what should I have for lunch? Should I have the healthy option, or should I,
Well, we all know
appease
where
my
that one
taste
may
buds?
go, where our instincts may go.
My
That way.
instinct tells me to take care of my body, but I'm not going to listen today because I want some pizza. You know what I mean?
Well, my instincts lean towards the pizza, so we have to disconnect. But still, you're to your point. That's it. We don't listen as much as we should. And I think the biggest reason, and we obviously, we dissected this umpteen different ways as this was happening. And in retrospect, and we kind of did the autopsy on the whole thing and said, why
Why?
did they not listen? And one of the best thing I could come up with, and still to this day, is that the lures were so powerful and they tapped into something so intrinsic within the human psyche that they actually overrode the instinct. And a lot of it had to do is because if you think about it, unless you have served in military, law enforcement, security, or grew up in a family of military, law enforcement, security, where mom, dad, grandma, grandpa just drilled certain things in you, my guess is last time someone taught you about your personal safety was in sixth grade. And so until we got to the age that we didn't have talking dogs, puppets, jingles, and coloring books to talk about safety, we pretty much were told by society that you're on your own because there's nothing in junior high, high school, college, or the working world really educating people. Yet the criminal element is always tweaking. They're even in prison, they swap tips and strategies, and they're constantly refining, improving, and evolving in what they do, while your general populace is walking around basically a sixth grade level of safety and security. Gee, what could go wrong?
That's right.
So those lures,
our curiosity gets the better of us, right? Curiosity killed the cat.
Or curiosity, could be greed, could be hormones, could be, because good looking guy, good looking girl, just like the guy said, she was a good looking girl on the side of the road.
Yeah.
There's that. There's greed, because also the same lures, think about Bernie Madoff. He didn't use a gun or knife either. He used a good story. That's right. So all of these things tap into something so intrinsic within that human psyche that the uneducated, unaware person who's operating at that sixth grade level probably isn't going to catch on until it's too late.
So you spent a number of years, I think you said 8 or 9 years with this guy, Ken.
Yeah, Ken Woodman.
Ken, and then eventually you've decided to create your own journey and become independent. And what was that shift for you?
It was very easy. First of all, of course, I already had the product knowledge, so to speak. But when I first started out, I kind of went for low-hanging fruit because I saw an immediate interest at the time from real estate agents who were going into property showings and open houses and dealing with a lot of very dicey situations.
Yeah.
Then I started running to a couple of other professions, some of the quote unquote guys in trucks type deal, HVAC, electrical, plumbing, where they were going into homes and encountering interesting stories and challenges, or could face a he said, she said situation. So there were certain professions that revealed themselves, so to speak. And that's kind of where I started. But now I do a lot of training for very, very high level professional individuals. I speak constantly to the C-suites, whether it's CEOs or CFOs or CIOs or CIOs or old McDonald EIEIOs. Whatever the case may be, it's really evolved to that next level. In fact, I just got booked this June in Pittsburgh to speak to, I know I'm going to probably massacre the acronym because I got alphabet soup swimming around my head, but I believe it's the Society of Government Meeting Planners. And these are 800 to 2,000 meeting planners that solely put together events for local, state, and federal government agencies across the US. And they've invited me to be their speaker on safety and security. And initially they were wanting somebody to talk about active shooter. And I flat out told them when they called me, I said, I don't talk about active shooter. And they went, oh, I said, I talk about left of bang, as the military calls it. What do you do to prevent the bang? And they went, oh, well, that's actually kind of a little bit more interesting. And nothing against, listen, I constantly, for those that feel that that's something training wise they need, I will never say don't do it. I just pretty much kind of acquiesce to law enforcement to do that training for me. And I know there are private individuals that do active shooter training. Great. Some of them do have military law enforcement background. Great. I just come from the perspective that if you are a business, you probably want to have the people who are going to be the first responders come in and do that training, because you obviously need to be on that same communication page with that entity to know what their protocols, their standard operating procedures are in those instances, so that you're communicating with the same language. That's why I don't want to interject myself in that, because I don't know what those protocols are going to be, city to city, state to state, as you will.
Sure.
So I stay in my lane. I know what my lane is. I don't pretend to talk about something I don't have any business talking about. So that's why I don't do active shooter training, but a lot of things that would lead up to an active shooter. We just saw a situation Monday of a church in Sacramento
We did.
where the shooter came in and killed his 3 kids and his wife before
Yep.
killing himself.
Yep.
That wasn't an active shooter. That wasn't a random church shooting.
Sure.
That was domestic violence finding its way into a church.
That's
But
right.
that same domestic violence finds its way into businesses often, not always in a shooter scenario. It could be a confrontation, it could be a verbal exchange. I was working a couple of years ago with a very well-known, you would know the household name, financial firm. And it was in a very, very upscale building here in downtown Dallas.
Okay.
And as I was meeting with their manager about doing some events for clients, he said, to your point, Jeff, did you notice how you had to be buzzed into our office suite off the elevator? I said, yeah. He said, you know why that happened? Because to your point, several months ago, we had our receptionist, her ex showed up and he got into a shouting match. She was crying. He was yelling at her. And all of that was echoing down the hallways. He said, you know the kind of clients we have in here on a daily basis? And yet all of them were privy to that shouting match going on in the front lobby. The next day, we called and made sure that within the week we had that installed. So now you have to be buzzed in to our office suite. That was an active shooter, but it's not something you want in your business either.
That's right.
So there's all kind of these dynamics and scenarios that I deal with that are that left of bang type approach to hopefully prevent things from escalating to the point there is a bang.
So a lot of what you're speaking to right now is, of course, in person, so physical or verbal. What about cybersecurity? Are you in that arena as well?
I get asked about that, and the reason I'm smiling laughing because we have to for everything now. BC doesn't mean before Christ, it means before COVID. So 2 years ago, BC, I spoke at a cybersecurity conference, but when the gentleman who was putting it all together here in the Dallas area approached me, he said, oh, so-and-so, our keynote speaker said you'd be a great speaker. So you talk about cybersecurity? I went, no. And he said, why are we talking? I said, because I talk about data security, not cybersecurity. He went, okay, color me ignorant. What's the difference? I said, I don't deal with people who hack your computers. I deal with people who hack your people. Bribery, blackmail, social engineering, impersonation. Those are the kind of things where I can compromise one of your internal assets. I don't care what firewall and passwords you put up. If I've compromised someone on the inside who wittingly or unwittingly is feeding me information on the outside, I don't care what you've spent in your cybersecurity. I still get what I want.
That's right. That's right. That's a great point. I don't think a lot of people think about that, but that happens all the time. It's almost like ransom.
Yeah. In fact, I've got a law firm very interested, is talking to me right now. They're a national law firm. They have a Dallas presence here. In about a week or so, I'm going in to meet with their team that really deals with those cyber type cases. And they're interested in actually referring me out to some of their clients, if not literally paying me to go out to some of their key clients and actually do training on site so that they're better prepared should these type of things occur.
Yeah. So most of the people watching this are probably not too privy on personal security outside of, you know, I know a lot of Texans and a lot of us Texans are licensed to carry a firearm, even though you don't have to get a license anymore, from what I understand. But a lot of us back then did, and we've gone through gun safety and things like that. But that's really not what you teach.
No.
You're teaching how to recognize the problem before it happens. And
Yeah, in fact,
for the everyday person walking through life, what are some of the things that what are some of the reasons people get taken advantage of the most? I mean, we touched on generally greed or, uh, looks or whatever the case may be, your hormones, but what are scenarios that people get taken advantage of?
Well, let me kind of speak at that 10,000 foot level because everybody has individual things, their age, your gender. Yeah, genders do matter. I'm sorry, they do. Age matters, physical abilities matter. All those things come into play. And by the way, when I say gender matters, that doesn't mean solely gender matters. I can take a 25-year-old woman and a 55-year-old man, and which is probably going to be in better shape to defend him or herself.
Who knows?
It's going to be in better shape to run away from the situation. I mean, you can't just say it, but I'm saying that there are factors that come into play, not only in your ability to defend yourself, but who might be targeting you. Who would be targeting a 55-year-old versus who would be targeting a 55-year-old man versus targeting a 25-year-old woman? And for what motivation? Because they're probably going to be very different.
Right.
So in those instances, a couple of things as we look at that 10,000 level down, there are 2 points that every predator, whether they're two-legged or four-legged on the planet. In fact, I tell folks, if you really want to watch how predators operate, skip all the crime channels and go to the Discovery and Planet and Animal Planet channels, because you can learn a lot watching predators in the wild,
Mm.
the four-legged. And if you watch, there's two things that they look for that every two-legged predator looks for as well.
Oh, I know one of them because I watch a lot of animal shows too. So
Right?
they're looking for the weakest member of the herd.
Vulnerability.
Okay.
That's one of them. Absolutely. Vulnerability.
Yeah.
And they're looking for that. And this is why I say you could have, let's say, a 35-year-old. In fact, I had a buddy that he sent me the text of a photo of him in his hospital bed after he and a buddy of his got attacked a few years ago. They were walking home from one of the bars here in Dallas after closing. Both these guys, bodybuilders, I knew him from Gold's Gym when I was working out there. Bodybuilders, trained MMA, but yet here he was with a laceration on his face in a hospital bed because those two guys were attacked by four guys. And those two guys were 3 sheets to the wind when they got attacked. So even though physically you would look at them and go, they were compromised physically and mentally because they were drunk. And when he sent me the text in the bed, he said, basically, we up. And he took responsibility for it. He said, yeah, we screwed up on this. But here's a situation where normally these were two guys that you would not mess with. But when they were drunk and compromised only home and there were 4 against 2, the odds were not in their favor.
What was the motivation for that?
Oh, they got rolled for their wallets.
Okay.
Yep. So you've got those kind of situations. And this is why I tell folks, victors and predators alike come in both genders. Both. Meaning predators can be female too. And I can tell you plenty of those stories. They're not always going to be physical predators, but they can certainly be physical predators.
Right.
However, when we flip that script, then obviously when we're talking about women more often not entirely, it's going to be a physical predator. I do know physical predators. We just saw, what is that, Tinder? What do they call it?
I haven't watched that yet, but
The guy that
heard
was
that
basically milking all these women off of Tinder
Yeah, and he was
financially.
yeah.
Yeah, so there was a perfect example. He was looking for women who mostly were vulnerable. Many of them had gone through divorce or death of a loved one. So they were emotionally vulnerable. There's so many things. But again, if we speak of that 10,000 foot level, then certainly one of the things that predators look for when they're stalking their prey, because they're not simply looking for prey, they're looking for easy prey. They don't want to work for it.
Right.
They're not doing this for exercise.
People are lazy.
Yeah. So they're just looking for the low hanging fruit. They're looking for, okay, who's potentially vulnerable? So that's number one. Number 2, opportunity. Vulnerability, opportunity. In fact, we talk about crimes of opportunity. That's a phrase.
That is.
I wish we had crimes of vulnerability, because to me, it's on equal footing. But crimes of opportunity. So
What's
what is
an
that?
example of a crime of opportunity?
Somebody walking out off their shift at a hospital at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's an empty parking lot. Somebody who is jogging on a track early in the morning when there's nobody else there. Somebody who is walking out of a shopping mall with bags in both hands and no way to really defend themselves or do anything from it. Or someone who's walking out totally distracted, looking at their phone more than they're watching what's going on around them. That lends itself to crimes of opportunity. In fact, I was just on NBC5 here just before Christmas on a commentary, because there had been a number of snatch and grabs at one of our illustrious malls here in the area, where people coming up just snatching phones out of people's hands and just running with them when they were outside the mall. And these were outside very upscale department stores. So what? This whole idea of people, and it's, to me, it's like fingernails on the chalkboard whenever I hear this. And yet everybody watching this podcast at some point or another, I don't care where in the country you are, you've seen and heard this on a news story. Something happens in an area, and the reporters come out to cover it, and they ask some neighbor, some patron in the area, what do you think about this? They will always find the one person that says this. Not intentionally, it just happens. The person acts so shocked, so surprised, going, oh my gosh, I can't believe something like this happened here. Because where we are is so, what's that S word?
Safe.
And for 30 plus years, one of my ongoing mantras, if anybody out there knows me, you know the words are about to come out of my mouth because I've said it thousands of times over the years, in person and online. There are no such things as safe or unsafe places. There are only safe or unsafe people. Stop paying attention to where you are. Start paying attention to who you're around or who is around you.
Right. And I think one thing I've heard as a piece of advice for when you are somewhere is that if you are somewhere and you understand where you are, let's say you're at a rock concert. Okay, I don't know why I came up with that, but that's just an example.
Oh, we had
You're
something
going
happen
to
at a rock
see a
concert a while back.
lot of people there dressed in rock band shirts, and if there's someone that sticks out like a sore thumb that just looks completely out of place, that's not working there or something, is that someone you should pay attention to?
Maybe, maybe not. I'm not big on appearances. In fact, if anything, I advocate against looking at appearance. I wish everybody were blind when it comes to this because
Really?
appearances lead to stereotyping, behaviors lead to profiling.
Okay.
And perfect example, about 10 plus years ago, there was a young girl who was at a Metallica concert on the East Coast. She went out there with her friends. She said, "Hey, I've got to go to the restroom." She left her purse, left her phone. She went to the restroom. She never came back. 2 weeks later, her body was found in a shallow grave a couple of miles away from the stadium. Now, here's a situation where she was surrounded by tens of thousands of people.
Hmm.
No one saw anything. No one heard anything. No cameras picked up anything. So how did she just disappear into the ether? Tells me somebody had a good story because she obviously didn't put up a fight. Wherever she went with someone willingly. So what was the story that led her to follow someone off site? Because surely, had it been a forced type scenario, she would have put up some type of struggle or fight or given off some signs to security or someone that this needed attention. It just to me spoke of, okay, someone used a good story, someone used a lure. But when you talk about rock concerts, there you go. And yet we have this notion that somehow we have safety in numbers. Certainly we are safer in numbers. Mm-hmm. If we learn anything from Pulse nightclub, Boston Marathon, shooting in Vegas, you don't have safety in numbers. You only can be safer in numbers. So I do advocate if you're going outside late night, you're going walking, you're going jogging, you're leaving your building kind of at the end of the day with not a lot of people there. If you can grab one or two other people, you're going to be safer going out. But it doesn't mean you're safe. Just like my buddy that got attacked with his other buddy because there were 4 against 2.
Right. Well, 2 of the examples you just used, the Boston Marathon and the Vegas shooting, just off the top of my head, really nothing those people could have done about those situations.
No. And yeah, after the Vegas shooting, I was on radio interviews literally from Fort Lauderdale to San Diego that next day. And people asked me, said, "Hey, Jeff, you know what?" I said, no, there's nothing anybody there could have done. But one takeaway, I think we should learn from that, and I hope some people did. If you remember the video footage came from that, there were people just drunk as could be out there flipping the guy off, shooting in the window and all. And they had friends trying to come and drag their little happy butts off to safety. People had to put themselves at risk to rescue people who otherwise shouldn't have been able to take themselves out of the situation. So while I will never say, hey, if you want to go out and you want to drink, that's fine. But understand your limits, because going over those limits, you could be putting someone else at risk if they're having to come and save your happy butt.
That's right. That's a good point. I think we've all been in scenarios, not to that extreme, but out drinking and where things have happened and you have had to either step in or maybe someone had to be the one to step in to save your ass once or twice.
Yep.
We've all been there in certain scenarios, especially guys who've been around bar fights and things of that nature.
Yep.
The one little thing can go wrong and you might accidentally die. You might actually take a broken beer bottle to the neck and it might be your last day.
I just spoke in August to the Texas Bar and Nightclub Association for their state conference. And we talked a lot about what alcohol and testosterone can create in a lot of environments. Yeah, it's not a pleasant thing. And especially if somebody's really gone over their limit. That's where things, and we've had umpteen shootings outside of bars and nightclubs since I spoke there in August. I've been kind of paying a little bit more attention to the market, but just
always will.
It seems like every 2 or 3 weeks, there's something somewhere where it's outside of a bar or nightclub where somebody's been shot, somebody's been roughed up, what have you. And again, it's just awareness, being not only aware of your environment, aware of people, but being self-aware. of what are my limits. I had a guy years ago that cut my hair, and not like it took a lot for him to cut my hair. But he was a young guy, really built, had a wife, had a kid at home. We were talking one day because he knew what I did. And he said, to your point, I've had buddies say, hey, man, why don't you carry? He said, because I know I'm a hothead. He said, Jeff, I'm the last person in the world needs to carry because I'm the guy that something would happen and I would pull it out and I would be going to jail.
Yeah.
So I know my limit, and that's why I will never carry. I went, you know what? Good for you, man. That's self-awareness. That's just as important as environmental and situational awareness.
I love the topic of self-awareness because the general population lacks a decent amount of self-awareness, I feel like. And it's just another word for also just thoughtfulness in being present in your daily life and understanding those type of scenarios. And
Yeah.
if you're making plans, being self-aware of what you can handle and what you can't, people push those limits far too often. Um, do you teach people how to be more self-aware?
I try. I mean, it's kind of incorporated in some of the training I do because when I talk about, for instance, vulnerability and opportunity, I typically go through what makes you vulnerable, what makes an opportunity for you. Yeah, you may be a healthy 35-year-old male that works out and runs and all these things, but you just won a ski trip to Aspen, you came back with a broken leg, and now for the next couple of months, you're hobbling around crutches. You now have to think about your situation, yourself, your safety a little bit differently as you're navigating the world out there because you're not running away, you're not running after them, and you're not probably doing much to fight back. So you might watch what hours you're out. You might watch where you parked your car. You might be a little bit more conscious and self-aware during that time of recovery, knowing that right now you're in a position of compromise and vulnerability, whereas in most situations you weren't.
Very interesting. So, who are some of your coolest clients?
Well, cool. That's a whole nother thing, but I would
You
say
know,
that
like, I don't
probably,
know if you're allowed to say names or not, or businesses names or not. I mean, that's probably
I mean,
goes against everything you teach.
I've worked with some cool clients like Dave and Buster's, Chuck E. Cheese, Neiman Marcus, EDS. Well, they're no around anymore. They Pro Systems, and I ended up working there. I've worked with several hotel chains. Just trying to think. Right now, I'm actually finding my way into the commercial property management arena for multi-tenant office buildings.
Uh-huh.
And so that I just spoke to a local group that's now preferred me to a national group on Tuesday of that particular vertical market. I would say my regular mainstay clients, my two biggest types of clients, insurance companies and financial firms, because 60% of my work is when those type of companies hire me to do client events where they want me to speak to their clients on how to better prepare themselves, their companies, their employees to mitigate these type of risks. Or in the case of financial firms,
Oh, that makes sense.
to address the Bernie Madoff types that someone could be coming in to milk the money that they're trying to keep safe for these people.
Right, right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
A lot of those crime documentaries you watch too. There's always, in the greedy money stories, there's always the life insurance scenarios where, hey, they murdered their spouse or something because they wanted to collect on the life insurance.
Yeah.
Is that something you speak to?
Yeah. I can't go into the case. In the Dallas area, people would know the case a couple of years ago where a certain fitness instructor was murdered. And that one smacks of exactly what you're talking about, in my opinion. And it's my 35-year educated opinion. There's too many signs on that one to ignore. And I'm pretty sure the police are on the same page with that thinking, but nothing as of yet, 4 or 5 years later, has been proved. But yeah, there are certain things that can certainly happen in those instances. And this particular program I have called Luring Your Money that I've done I've done it for the tax side CPAs, I've done it for registered investment advisors, done it for wealth management, because a lot of these people have more of that high touch with their clients where they can have some honest conversations with them about, hey, you've had a lot of lifestyle change. You're having a lot of spending pattern changes. There's a lot of things going on that is not normal for you. What's going on here? And more often than not, it speaks to some new interest that's come into their world. And there's just certain things and questions that need to be followed up on. And it's a conversation that can be really touchy because you're getting kind of personal with people. You're definitely getting up in their business. And yet, if you don't, and you don't do some kind of intervention, and then the worst case scenario happens. But I've heard the unfortunate stories after the fact where things did happen. In fact, one lady came up to me one time. I was just finishing up speaking to Tech Side CPAs. She was a CPA. She came forward. She said, Jeff, I grew up in a moneyed family here in Highland Park, and we lost mom several years ago. Dad became a mall walker, one of our illustrious malls. And to your point, this woman knew who my dad was. She knew when and where and how to target him. So she just coincidentally started showing up at the mall at the mornings my dad was, and started, conversation led day. She said, you know where this is going. I'm going to fast forward to the end. But she milked my dad for about, I think she said around close to $1 million
No kidding.
before leaving him at the altar at the Just a Peace, because my dad thought they were getting married. And she left him standing there just a peace officer. My dad was so heartbroken, so distraught, so embarrassed he'd been taken, that 2 months ago he took a gun and killed himself. We went to the police. They said, we know exactly who you're talking about. Your dad wasn't your first, won't be your last. But unfortunately, every man has given her the money. So there's not a crime that's been committed. There's nothing we can do.
Wow, that's an incredible story.
And yet the pattern was there. And she saw it. Others have seen it. I have dealt with so many people who have gone at death or divorce. Those are two big points of vulnerability. And the people who unfortunately are on the backside of that, they're dealing with the emotional trauma from it, are so vulnerable emotionally. And when you're vulnerable emotionally, you're also vulnerable fiscally to that person that comes along that seemingly can fill that void. And it can just lead to some very exploitive situations if not properly trained, or if someone doesn't speak up and intervene.
Right. I think in those certain situations, when there are telltale signs of, whether it be a man or a woman being taken advantage of in a relationship financially by the other spouse, and it continuing for such a long time, there's always signs, right? Is that person not having, their other close relationship saying, hey, you need to watch out for this because we're noticing this, this, and this? Are these people lacking the network of friends and family that should be there kind of looking out for them?
It can happen. Yes, it can happen. And to me, that's why I seek to educate the financial advisors, the wealth managers, the people who they've already trusted with their money, one of their most valuable assets.
CPA.
So to be that person that can be that unbiased point of intervention to say, listen, I'm just your CPA. I'm your financial advisor. I'm your wealth manager. At the end of the day, it's your money. But based upon training I've received, there are some red flags going on here I just want to bring to your attention. As opposed to someone who may be bringing it and they let go, you're just being jealous. You're just being jealous of the fact I found somebody. No, this person has no point of jealousy involved. They're just who they are professionally.
And you're training these non-biased third parties to watch out for these opportunities of vulnerability.
Yeah. Now I do have a women's seminar. It's a 2-hour women's seminar, and I do go through that for the ladies because they are a little bit easier. Well, no, I don't want to say easier. They're a little bit more prevalent, Mark, for those kind of approaches than the men are. But let's face it, we all know guys who have been taken.
We do. I think women are probably hit on for that reason more often than men. Men don't get, courted like that as much as women do.
Yeah.
Let's talk about con artists for a minute, because you spent
some time around
con artists. Tell me your experience there.
Well, there again, it's the power of a good story. So often, especially here in Texas, we think of threats having to do with guns and knives. And to me, the greatest threat would be a good story, because if you see a gun or knife, you're in trouble. Whether or not you hear a good story, you won't always know if trouble's on the way or trouble's right in front of you. And to me, it's not a matter of educating the eyes, but educating the ears. And this is why I'm saying that stereotyping is about appearances, but profiling is about behavior. So I always try to teach people focus on behaviors, and not just a single behavior, even 2 or 3 single behaviors. But as a buddy of mine, Stan Walters, he's the lie guy. He'd be a great interview if you can get him for your show. He literally wrote the book on interrogation for U.S. Special Forces. He's been training law enforcement, military, and intelligence agencies for 30 years around the world. Worked on the OJ case, John Benet Ramsey case, Gary Condon case. Was a commentary of the national news. But he harps on this a lot as far as these clusters. You don't just look for one or two things. You look for patterns. You look for clusters of behaviors that speak to some other type of pattern.
Why don't you give us an example?
Man, there's something to draw from. So, for instance, if someone, and not just speaking the world deception, because that's really what he deals with, in my particular world of what we're dealing with in context right now, I would say someone that you didn't meet necessarily, and this can be, there may be exceptions rule, but I'm just speaking, someone that you didn't meet through a trusted friend, family member. You know, I'm dealing with high net individuals. Okay, you went gambling in a casino in Monaco and you met this person there. Then 3 months later, you're at a Club Med resort and that person was there. Was that random, chance, or coincidence? Or are you dealing with a very, very high level stalker who has you in their crosshairs?
Mm.
So you didn't meet them through someone. They just kind of like the mall walker, the husband,
They just
the
found their way into your life
or
for,
they've done their research
yeah.
and they know who you are or what you represent in whatever way. It could be a position that you have where they're trying to compromise you for the purpose of data theft. There's all kind of factors here. But point being, someone that you didn't meet through normal channels, but someone who has made a point to meet you.
Gotcha.
That's just, but that could be random, chance, or coincidence. But if you combine that then with someone who approaches you for a purpose of either love interest or investment in early stages with some level of, they're not really taking their time in the normal courtship. I mean, they'll groom you like a child molester will, but you understand that their focus is very intentional. And if it's a love interest, it's pushing towards a relationship early on. If it's a fiscal interest, there's usually going to be, oh, I'm starting a new business, or I found this new business opportunity, or something so-and-so. And even more so if they're like, but I'm not telling a lot of people about this. In other words, you're special. Again, it's almost like a child molester. I don't, there's a lot of kids in the neighborhood, but you're special to me. It's, in fact, when I do my seminars for parents about child molesters, there are 6 steps on how to seduce your child or teenager. When I do the luring your money seminar, there's 6 steps on how to seduce your financial portfolio. When you match up the steps, they're almost identical. So there's a certain definitive pattern, but those clusters of behaviors, and again, I can't get to everything here and don't have time. And there's,
right.
It depends on the audience I'm speaking to as well.
Of course.
But certainly, again, when we're talking about this, it's never one or two things. It's just like when I'm talking about domestic abuse. It's not the person you're dating that just gets angry, because everybody gets angry. It's not the person that may even just hit the wall. Sometimes we just have to take our frustration with a punching bag or a wall, but that's a punching bag or wall. It's not you. So there are certain clusters and behaviors of things that we look for that speak to either future or potential exploitation or violence. But it's always a matter of looking at cluster. You can't just look at one thing or one situation or one reaction and judge the person based on that. That's just not fair for any of us on the planet, because we all have our moments. All of us, road rage or whatever, we all have our moments. So you can't judge someone on an incident, but you can watch for patterns and clusters.
You can. I feel like talking to you right now. I'm going to be going out in public and be in all these different situations and kind of, be looking out for things, right? Because I think you're saying that's very important. But where's the line between, I don't want to be paranoid everywhere I go looking for all this, but I need to be aware. Like, right. How do you balance that?
I've got several Israeli friends, and they're perfect examples. The people who actually grew up over there in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Because if you would think anybody be paranoid, it'd be them. But they are some of the people who just love and embrace life. They live for the moment. They live in the moment. They enjoy themselves. They are full on with life. And I so admire that about the ones that I know and I've known over the years. And so they've struck the balance. They've found the balance. It is being aware. It's not being fearful. And I've used this illustration before. You and I were walking down the street. We're just coming out of a bar or club somewhere, and we're walking down the street, and we hear something around the corner. And you're thinking, hey, Jeff, what's up? And I'm like, Jordan, I heard a couple of buddies I was talking. I heard them before saying that they were going to try to set us up and scare us over here. Okay, what was a moment of fear just became a moment of awareness. Now you're like, oh, yeah, well, screw that. We're going to go around the corner then. We're going to scare the crap out of them. See how awareness replaced fear. When you actually understand what to look for, when you actually understand what to listen for, when you actually understand what you need to be, way you need to be approaching people and people should be approaching you, you've set those boundaries. When you have done that true self-awareness and homework, that would be fear, because fear is nothing but the unknown.
That's
When
right.
you take that and flip it on its head and replace with awareness, you've just done that. You've replaced fear with awareness. And
Which
that's how,
creates confidence.
hmm?
Which creates confidence.
Absolutely it does. Not false confidence, not false sense, where it's like, okay, I'm not Superman. I still have my limitations here. So I need to be aware of where my limits are. Okay, for me to go over there, that would be foolish. For me to confront that person, that would be foolish. For me to confront a person just flip me off in the car passing by, that would be foolish. I don't need to engage and enrage someone that I don't know. That's stupid.
Yes. Yes.
But it allows me that freedom now to navigate the world that we live in without being fearful and paranoid. I'm just now more aware. And so when things do pop up, I'm also more self-aware, going, all right, I tell folks, you have two responses to a potential threat. Either it's time for you to leave, or, okay, it's time for me to leave. And learning the difference is the beginning of wisdom and discernment.
That's great. I love that. That's a great takeaway.
Well, Kenny Rogers said years ago, gave the best advice word. You got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them,
fold them.
walk away, and know when to run.
Yeah, yeah. He passed away the February before COVID broke out too. He lived up to that song, huh?
Yep.
Oh, Kenny. Well, man, this has been great, and we're running short on time, but I wanted to go over two more things with you as we're wrapping up here. So, what are like your top 3 tips for the average person as far as awareness in their daily life, things they can look out for to protect themselves?
Well, first of all, recognize your own limitations. Know when to hold them, know when to fold them, know when to walk away, know when to run. Know there's time to step up and a time to step away, walk away, run away. Be self-aware. And that's okay. Understanding your limits and your limitations is okay. We all have them. Everybody has them. It's just know what yours are. Secondly, understand that the greatest threat you ever may face will probably not come from a gun or knife. It will come from a good story. So be aware. Listen. Don't just see. Listen to what people are saying. Listen to what they're asking you to do. Listen to where they're asking you to go. Be aware that not everyone who approaches you has good intent. And then the third and most important that I will always harp on because it's true. Trust your instincts. That's the best thing to do, because 200 people that didn't got into our cars and vans years ago. Trust your instincts. They have been around for millennia to keep us vertical on the planet. Don't let them be subjugated by your intellect when the instincts have been genetically engineered to keep you alive.
I think that's fantastic advice. All 3 of those bullet points: self-awareness, and trust your instincts most of all. That's amazing, Jeff. Well, for anybody watching that wants to attend one of your events, I immediately have interest in the financial one. I'm in the financial business, like we talked about earlier, but that would be an interesting seminar for me to attend, just to provide some education in that area. How do we find you, and how do we attend one of your events?
Well, I'm typically at the mercy of those that contract me, because most of my events are private events that someone has hired me to come in, and most time work with their clients. Some will hire me to do community events. That's okay. When I work with companies and corporations, I do staff training. Usually that night or a week later, I'll come back and do training for the spouses and teenagers. But there again, I'm not in control of the audiences. So it's a matter of somebody books me to come in, and then they put the audience in front of me.
Okay. And your website, you have a great website that speaks a little to what you do. What is your website?
Defense by Design, defensebydesign.com. And I would also encourage anybody out there, especially in the professional world, connect with me. Yeah, Facebook's okay, but LinkedIn is where I do a lot of the posting about the things we're talking about here. So just find me under Jeff McKissick under LinkedIn and connect with me there.
Okay. Jeff McKissick, great having you on the Mission 1000 podcast. I look forward to speaking with you in the future.
Jordan, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the time you allowed me to share.
You bet, brother. Talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.